and we'll be having the guest in a moment, in 2 minutes. Welcome to the stream. We are having a special guest, the guest that we are waiting for an entire year, our friend Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is the guy from the Perpetual Chess Podcast. He's the host. He's just creating all of the fantastic stuff related to having our community enriched with the coaches, instructors, players, organizers, and all of the different type of people in the chess world. And at the same time, Ben recently has written the book that we're waiting for many years. And now, before I'll introduce you a little bit more and give you the opportunity to do so, the question from Thinker Teacher. By the way, Thinker Teacher is me. Do you remember that I told you to write the book after you'll collect more of this stuff with Perpetual Chess Improvement?
I do, but you know, Tomas, they say that ideas are a dime a dozen. It's all about the execution.
Yeah, I fully agree. But at least I was one of the first to put this idea into motion.
That's true. Yeah, no, I do appreciate that little inspiration.
Because I knew, by the way, that if you continue this, because I was not that much sure if you withstand, let's say the time, but I knew that if we withstand the time, finally we'll get that many, let's say, interesting guests and all of this stuff, that together, if you put into the book, it will enrich our community, and I was keeping fingers crossed for you to do so. Therefore, even if I didn't say so very publicly and explicitly, I was one of the fan, probably you know it already, that was keeping fingers about this Perpetual Chess Improvement series and putting this into the form of the book, and now you know why I'm so excited that you finally did it. Congratulations.
Thank you. It feels good to be done and see the book starting to make its way into the world.
Okay, excellent. Therefore, officially welcome to the stream, guys. There is the interview with our friend Ben Johnson. And Ben, now it's your turn. If you can introduce yourself and if you can tell us why you did that and why you are so great that finally you did that.
So yeah, my name is Ben. I have a podcast, like Tomas said. First of all, shout out to Tomas. He always brings the good vibes. So that's why I'm always happy to join him on stream and talk some chess. So yeah, I host a podcast called Perpetual Chess. We interview top players, trainers, authors, also adult improvers, do some book reviews. So try to cover chess basically from every angle. And I've been doing it since 2016 at this point, which makes me feel old. So there's just a lot of material. I've got something like 500 hours of podcasts now. So I was approached by New in Chess to write a book sort of compiling all the chess improvement advice. And as Tomas said, it's now making its way into the world. It's not available everywhere yet, but New in Chess is selling it and you can get it on their app, and Amazon will have it soon. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So that's where we are.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the introduction. And now the question for getting into the book, because we will be talking mostly about the book, but with the context of improvement and with the concept of progress. If I can ask, when the idea about writing the book popped up in your mind with some kind of direction about realizing this goal into the real product, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed writing. It's always something that I kind of wished I'd pursued more at certain points in my life. And, you know, what a lot of people who enjoy writing tell themselves is they know they like writing, but they don't know what to write about. And it occurred to me at some point that with this 500 hours of material, I don't really have that excuse. I have plenty to write about. I mean, I've gotten to interview so many legends, and I understand that not everyone can listen to every episode, or even if you can, it's hard to remember everything that you hear. So it was a good opportunity to try to sort of sum things up. And I had a few different ideas of sort of different themes that could be covered from the many hours of podcast, because we don't talk just chess improvement, but in discussing it with the publishers at New in Chess, we kind of landed on the idea of focusing on the chess improvement advice that's been given. So that's the short version of how this project came about.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question that pops in my mind immediately: how did you get that many amazing guests? Something like attracted to your podcast, and how did you get to convince them to meet you in the virtual studio? Because take notice that even though most of these, let's say, figures are really much known, but if, with all of the respect, you are not a superstar like, for example, Fabiano Caruana with C2 Square Podcasts, right? And therefore, I'm curious, how can you get that many, let's say, amazing, people from our community into your studio? What did you do? Did you bribe them?
Yeah, that's what I do. I make a lot of fake promises and then hope that they don't remember. Tell them I'm going to send them money, give them their own private island. No, basically what it boils down to is the chess world is very small. So outside of people you mentioned like Fabiano Caruana, most chess players are not being like deluged with media requests. And the other thing is it's a very welcoming community. Even like now I have a decent sized audience. I've been around for a long time, but even when I was starting, like right off the bat, I was able to get pretty good guests. Like Sam Shanklin was like my 9th guest, and I didn't have like a personal connection to him. So, I mean, I think it's really a credit to the chess community at large that, more often than not, if you ask someone about an interview, they may not be able to do it right away, but eventually you might get a chance to talk to them.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we get into the topic of adult chess improvement or improvement and progress, all of this, let's say in a general, the super simple question that we'd like to start with, Ben, how to improve at chess?
Okay, so yeah, I happen to have written a book about this. So I lay it all out, and the first part of the book is devoted to what I call the 4 pillars of chess improvement, because part of the premise of the book is like, there's all this talk about chess improvement, obviously on my podcast, but way beyond that in the Reddit forums and the chess.com forums and everywhere else. But there's not that much consensus. But as I thought about it, I felt like there was consensus on these 4 topics, which are to play serious games, to review those games, to do some sort of daily puzzle work or tactic work. And then the one that I felt like wasn't necessarily mentioned as much, but just as important, was to find a community in order to keep you going. So I call those 4 things the 4 pillars of chess improvement. I think those are the things that you want to have incorporated into your routine. And then everything else I say is up for debate. I have my own opinions. I don't consider my opinions to be the end all be all about like end games and blindfold chess studies and, how much time to spend on openings and all of those evergreen questions. I have my opinions. You might have yours. There's certainly room for disagreement, but I felt like if you start with those 4 things and focus on those 4 things, you're off to a good start.
Thank you very much. And from your opinion, from what you have already researched, listened, watched, and all of this stuff, which of these pillars are tested the most?
The one that I feel like I'm still not on as firm a ground, actually, this might surprise you, Tomas, is the tactics one. Because I feel like, I was born in 1977. I started playing tournament chess, serious chess when I was 12, and I saw a lot of good players. I mean, they were young like me when I was young at the time, climb the ranks without doing a ton of tactics. They were just playing nonstop, and they were sort of enveloped in the culture. So now as we've moved forward, and also there weren't as many tactics available then. I mean, we're talking the Stone Ages, before tactics trainers, before internet chess was just sort of taking hold. So in order to do tactics in those days, you needed to get certain books, and there weren't that many to choose from. Now, you might have studied tactics in the sense of like playing through Mikhail Tal or Judith Polgar or Bobby Fischer's games, but you weren't necessarily solving puzzles. But it's so thoroughly recommended by so many trainers. And I mean, obviously, there are exemplars of people who've really improved their tactical vision by doing tactics, that I did feel like that one was sort of the most tenuous of the 4. The other 3, I think you can't argue with at all.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question that probably may be pretty easy for you to, let's say, answer, but at the same time, it's very important for our community because of the so-called patterns. How many patterns do masters have? Do you have any idea about it? Did you have a look about some of the research? Some like in average?
Yeah, I couldn't really put a number on it. I mean, there's certainly been research that says, like, master level players have, assimilated tons of patterns, but I couldn't give you a number.
I'll just fill it out because I would like to, let's say, put this a little bit further. Masters, because it was from chess research, of course, it's estimated because probably it cannot be precisely measured. Masters can have, depending on their level, for example, from FIDE master up to grandmaster, they have from 10,000 up to 50,000 chess patterns. There was the research about it that it's some like estimated number, and this is one of the reasons that they can play that quickly and that much precisely with the high level of play at the bullet or blitz games. Therefore, they cannot calculate everything that quickly, and that's why the level of their play at the blitz is that high. That is my assumption. What do you think about it?
Okay, good to know.
Do you agree on this? That they have, let's say, most of the knowledge that, let's say, they are just using during the quick control games based on these patterns. Do you agree on that?
It rings true. I haven't conducted the study myself, so I couldn't personally verify, but it sounds plausible to me.
Okay, and now another question about the coach, because many people says that coach is necessary. Some people say it is not necessary. What is your opinion about chess coach? Is chess coach necessary to make progress, or maybe it depends? And if it depends on what?
Okay. So yeah, this falls under the rubric of the community part. So I do talk about getting a coach. Number one thing is I absolutely recommend it. Now, whether it's necessary, I'd say that's a little harder to answer. I actually think the newer you are to chess, the more helpful a coach is. As you get stronger and start to move towards our level, like I've had periods where I work with a coach and had periods where I don't, and they're always helpful. But of course, there's a cost benefit analysis, and money is not infinite. So you do have to think about these considerations. And as you get older and stronger and get to know how to use an engine, there's certainly a lot you can learn without a coach. So I would stop short of saying it's absolutely indispensable. But if you're new to chess and you're taking it seriously and you value your time, then you absolutely should get a coach, because you're wasting time by trying to answer these questions on your own when there are people who could just get you the answers and point you to the right resources much more quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent answer, by the way, because I have very, very similar experience and very similar perspective about it, that if you are super new to chess, the more you can get from community, or from chess coaches, instructors, streamers, YouTube, everything, but it's not like a concisive form, the faster you can reach the level that you can feel comfortable to make the journey and experiments on your own.
Yeah, I agree.
And another question, another topic that you put into the book is the idea about other aspects of chess you may want to work on. What are these mysterious aspects?
Well, that's what I was saying. That's kind of, so we have the 4 pillars of chess improvement, and then you have everything else. And this is on the board stuff, because I also have a chapter about sort of away from the board stuff. And there's a free excerpt for anyone who's interested from the New in Chess page. If you Google the book and New in Chess, you can see the table of contents. But one chapter is, do amateurs overemphasize opening studies? Do you need to know end games? Learning from the classics. I call this chapter mimicking the masters, because it used to be said, like, you've got to know the classics. You've got to know the classics. And I feel like in recent times, in the digital times, that's also being disproven a little bit. Board visualization and blindfold chess. A lot of people wonder, do I need to know how to play blindfold in order to get better at chess? Whether or not speed chess is good for your game. And then I talk about the woodpecker method, which, whether it's better to repeat tactics or continuously solve, not even just tactics, repeat puzzles or continuously solve new puzzles.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am pretty much interested about other aspects as well. But before we'll do this, there is the question from the chat. Therefore, I'll be addressing the questions from time to time, okay?
Sure. Shout out to the chat.
The first question is from our friend Rado. Rado asks, how much coaching is optimal, in bracket weekly or monthly? And what is the minimal reasonable amount?
So it really comes down, where coaches, in my experience, help the most is going over your serious games. So a lot of it is a function of how much you're playing. So in the book, I talk about ideally you're playing in actual tournaments. To me, those provide the best learning opportunities just because they feel so much more important. So basically, you want a coach that can go over all of your serious games. So if you're playing 50 a year, that would mean at least an hour a week. But if you're playing less, you can probably get away with less, but you also have to understand your improvement's probably going to be a little bit slower. But I don't think there's an upper limit on how much a coach could help. It's just obviously, again, you might run into budgeting issues if you're paying someone, $50 or even $100 an hour to meet with you 4 hours a week. That adds up quickly. But I don't think there is, I do say in the book, and I believe this, that a coach is not a substitute for studying on your own. So whatever hours you spend with a coach, that's only going to be a fraction of your chess time. But nonetheless, there's no no upper bound, but the lower bound, again, is enough time that they can go over all of your serious games. And you should look at them on your own too. You should look at them on your own first, so that you can sort of generate your own thoughts, not just be spoon-fed. And then it'll be more instructive when you go and look with a coach and they're able to say, well, you were right about this, but you failed to see this, that sort of thing.
I'm very, very grateful for this one, because I have some of the students, and many times I tell them that the more questions they prepare to the next session, the more games they play and analyze by themselves, the more curiosity they have, the faster they can get the progress. And there was one case of one of my students that I just told him some of the, let's say, ideas that he was missing all of the time. He went to the tournament and went into the 5th place. Therefore, it was pretty shocking to him, but not to me.
Nice, that's good to hear.
Because normally he was some like 15, 20, something like that. But after this, let's say, some pieces of advice, he went to the tournament and took 5th place. Therefore, von Waldhofen, keep fingers crossed for you on your improvement. Another question about the aspects of, let's say, stuff related to, let's say, chess is the question that is a little bit like provocative, a little bit like, let's say, difficult to answer for some, but I need to ask it anyway. First question is, why amateurs believe that the opening study is so important and they devote that much time to this part of the game?
So I write about this at length in the book, and I boil it down to two ideas, basically: identity and agency. So it's not so much that I think deep down inside, newer players get told so often not to emphasize openings as much that I think deep down inside they know that there may be a grain of truth to it. But I think the openings are kind of bite-sized and more understandable. But the concepts of identity and agency, number one, with the opening, you kind of get to like plant your flag on a certain type of chess position. You get to say, like, I'm a Sicilian player, I'm a Gambit player, I'm on Team Benoni, whatever it might be. So there's identity, but there's also agency. You're the one making the choice. You have control over. So I think that there's this sort of deep-seated appeal in openings that makes people want to spend a lot of time on them. But as every coach says ad nauseum, especially for players rated, say, it used to be below 1400. I feel like everything's being pushed down with rating deflation. So maybe now it's like 1200. But the bottom line is most coaches will tell you the openings are not deciding the outcome of your game that often. And I do think that's true. So for that reason, I advise if you're rated below 1500, you don't really, and this is a big caveat, and your goal is to get as much improvement as you can with your time. Because some people, they might say, you know what, I have a job, I have a family, I want to do what I enjoy when I play chess. And my objective is not to sort of, maximize every possible rating point I could gather so that when I die, I'll be, 1800 instead of 1600. Like, who cares, Yeah. But if that is your objective, if your objective is to maximize your chess time, improve as much as you can, then at the lower levels, I don't think you should spend more than 20% of your time on openings.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question from the chat, this time from our friend Curtis. He asked the question about the let's say, ratio for the next parts. He says, how much time should you spend for endgame, middle game, and opening? Probably he's asking about the ratio, if you can divide it into 3 parts from your perspective. And in the meantime, you can divide it, if you wish, of course, for the beginners, intermediate, and maybe advanced players. Is it the same one, different one, and what ratio would you like to be?
Okay, well, I've got kind of a hot take on this one. And I do have my opinions, but I make no claim that my opinions are any more valid. You know, I used to be around 2,100 FIDE. Now it's gone down with the rating deflation, but I consider myself a 2,100 player, and there are certainly stronger players than me, accomplished trainers, who would disagree. But my hot take is that, again, game analysis will give you the opportunity to review all aspects of your game. So I don't necessarily feel like you have to spend X amount of time on endgame, X amount of time on middle game. I feel like the main thing is play serious games, review them seriously, and then you'll be spending the appropriate ratio of time on each aspect of those games. Now, openings are a little bit different because you need to memorize some stuff, especially as you get stronger. So that's why I do say 20% or so of your standalone time can be spent on openings, sort of irrespective of your serious games. But for middle games and end games, to me, it's, you know, there are some basic end games that you should maybe learn. And of course, there's basic checkmate patterns and stuff like that. But beyond that, let the games be your guide.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have another questions, this time from my student and my moderator, Pumpkin the Cat, our friend Mike. Mike asks, how much and how should beginners and intermediate players use engines when analyzing VIA games?
So I've got a chapter on this too, of course.
Yeah, we'll be sometimes skipping some of the parts and jumping out on and on.
Yeah, so there's no like one right answer for this either. The important thing is that you stay engaged even if you're using an engine. Now, I do say in the book, and I quote International Master John Donaldson from one of our interviews on this. I mean, he's an advocate for, when you do review the games that you play, first review them without an engine. And then some people say don't use an engine at all. Many people say do use an engine. I think it's fine to use an engine, but I think it is good, to at least first look at it without an engine. But beyond that, I mean, I feel like people, now you just have to resist the temptation to not think on your own. But the fact that you always have the answer is an amazing resource. And in my mind, you should definitely take advantage of it.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question, I am pretty interested about visualization, because this is the topic that my community asked me all over the time to do so. In the beginning, I was a little bit trying to put it off, but now I know that I need to do it the next year. But anyway, why board visualization is so hard, and at the same time, connected to this question, why it caused that many problems?
Yeah, I think this is particularly an issue for adult learners. I don't know if the person asking the question came to chess as an adult, but basically it's much harder to sort of form neural pathways as you get older. And there's something about picturing a chessboard that it's kind of like language or studying music. It's something where it's much easier if the ground has been laid as a kid. So unfortunately, it just requires a lot of work. Now, I think you need to do some extra work to try to get up to a baseline level. There's a particular book that I recommend if you're, say, between 1200 and 1500. It's called Chess Steps 2, Thinking Ahead, that kind of takes you through all these blindfold puzzles. And they start with basic questions like, if there's a queen on, like, picture an empty board, and if there's a queen on g6 and a white queen on g6 and a black king on h8 and a white bishop on, say, a2, is it checkmate, stalemate, none of the above? And they give you questions like that, where you just have to picture a few pieces on the board, try to answer the question, and go. And obviously, I didn't give white a king, so it's not a legal position, but you get the idea. So they're just basic questions like that. You can ask questions like, how can a knight, what's the minimum number of moves for a knight to get from A1 to A2? You know, and just try to really get used to sort of picturing all 64 squares in your head. So if you're new to the game, I also am a fan of the vision trainer that Lee Chess and chess.com have, where all they're doing is just popping up up a square and you have to click on it as fast as you can. So there's lots of resources to get to sort of a core competence level. And unfortunately, if you come to chess as an adult, it's going to be kind of extra work. And it's unfair that you get like a lot of extra work if you come to chess as an adult. But I do think that it's worth investing a lot of time in if you have sort of a 15-year vision of like how you're going to improve at chess. Because it's like people who study a language, you know, how people who study a language by living in a country but never studying it academically often will have a decent vocabulary, but not very good grammar. If you study chess without sort of having done the visualization work, it's like you might be able to play better, but everything's always going to be harder than if you can just sort of, if you've done the work to sort of effortlessly be able to, as a starting point, say what colors, like if I say F6, can you tell me if it's white or black, and basic questions like that. So the book is called Chess Steps 2, Thinking Ahead. And it's a great book if you're below 1500 to spend a lot of time on. You know, it'll keep you busy for months.
If I'm not mistaken, it is the series from Steppen Method from the Dutch players, right? Dutch pedagogue and Dutch psychologist, right?
Very good. Yeah. And the whole series is great, but but that book in particular, I think is worth its weight in gold. And it's like $10. It's not expensive.
Okay. Thank you very much. And another question, because I warned you, Ben, that there will be a lot of questions from the chat, because I told you.
Happy to answer them.
That this community is super curious about it, because I just, let's say, warmed up a little bit our, let's say, community with going the last days about your book, about the content, about the questions for you, and I told them that Ben knows everything. Of course, I just make a little bit of, let's say, smiling, but they just started to believe it, and I'm not correcting them. Okay?
Okay. Let's roll with it.
Yeah, therefore, that's why Rado has another question. Rado asks, how much valuable tool is blindfold training regarding to player level and compared to other study methods?
Yeah, so I talk about this. So the stuff I just described, if you're new to chess and struggle to picture the board with your eyes closed, maybe struggle to follow, say, a 10 to 15 move game with your eyes closed, then it's worth studying it. But then there are a lot of players who are solving blindfold puzzles, you know, all the way up to the grandmaster level as an additional training method. And that's where there are some people who think that's a great training tool. Others disagree. I asked Grandmaster R.B. Ramesh, who's, you know, he trains Grandmaster Pragananda among many other young phenoms and written some great books and one of the top trainers in the world. And I liked what he said about it, which was basically like, what you're trying to get better at in chess is what's called calculation, where there's a position in front of you and you're trying to see all the possible relevant sequences over the next 3 or 4 moves. So he thinks it's more important to practice that once you can picture the board without issue, he thinks it's more important to practice actual calculation than to just over and over again play blindfold games with the idea that it's going to improve your calculation. So if you want to become a great blindfold player, then play blindfold. But if you want to become a great chess player, then you want to work on your chess calculation, not necessarily your blindfold. Not necessarily blindfold once you're like at an intermediate level.
Thank you very much.
And again, just my opinion, although in this case it's Ramesh's opinion too.
Yeah, got it, no problem. And another question that is connected to this pretty nicely is the ability to play blindfold chess necessary to reach a master level?
Yeah. I mean, I would say most masters can play a game blindfold, like they can complete a game. But I would say the skill level is pretty wide in terms of like how well they'll play. And I'm positive that there are people who made it to master without ever playing a full blindfold game. So it's, you know, it's a good skill to have, but it's not like indispensable.
Okay. And now another question related to approaching chess not to get burned. The question is about speed chess, blitz and bullet. How much to, let's say, use it not to get burned, but at the same time to enjoy chess and to make some kind of improvement, because we are talking about this topic. What about speed chess, blitz and bullet? How could you, let's say, manage these topics?
Man, you guys, I'm glad that you're asking me all stuff that I've written about, so that it's like I don't have to just make stuff up. I've already given it a lot of thought. So the first thing I'll say is Bullet can be a lot of fun. I've certainly had some sleepless nights playing Bullet, especially when I was younger. But when you play Bullet, just don't even pretend that it's going to help your chess. It's not going to help your chess.
Excellent.
Okay. It might not hurt your chess. It might not, but it's absolutely not going to help. So you might as well be playing World of Warcraft or whatever.
Yeah.
As far as your chess is concerned. Now, blitz chess is a different story, and I write about it in some depth in the book. But basically, my advice is, people used to say blitz is bad for your chess. I think that's overly simplified and definitely not true from the intermediate level up. It's a great way to learn openings in particular quickly. And also, as Tomas mentioned, pattern recognition. It can help with pattern recognition. It can help with time management. So I think for the intermediate level on up, as long as you do maintain the sort of bedrock principle that you're trying to learn from every game you play, you're not just going on these huge binges, then I think intermediate level on up, blitz is great. Now, below the intermediate level, I do worry about it just because there's playing a game of chess. I mean, I'm not a pilot, but to me, it's kind of like being like a pilot or like trying to operate a flight simulator. You know, there's so many variables you have to think about at all times that in order to try to just sort of speed your way through it, I think you're more likely to develop bad habits. So I'm like a lot of coaches and trainers.
Yeah.
I'm more of an advocate for at least 10 minutes per game. 15 would be even better. And again, this is until you reach, say, 1500 level on chess.com, something like that. Then you can start to incorporate speed chess. But again, this is with the caveat that you're really trying to get better, because I love speed chess. And I, you know, you might, like, if you're at work all day and then you just want to blow off some steam, whether it be with Bullet or Blitz, like, to me, that's totally fine. It's just, you know, you have to make the value judgment about, like, are you trying to maximize your improvement time, or are you just trying to relax after a long day?
Yeah, excellent point. And I will just add just a little bit of, let's say, extension about this rapid games, because I'm advocating this as well, that many times I tell my students and the community as well that it's the best one to play with the at least small increment. Because even if you play 10-0, right, or 15-0, if you do not have increment, but if you will have the winning position, that would require another 8, 10, or 15 moves to convert it smoothly, but your opponent to flag you, probably it will hurt that you couldn't convert it into the full point. Do you agree on that, with playing the games with small increment as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree.
Okay, and another question, or another provocative statement, if I can say, because there is a lot of misconceptions about it, and many players and many, let's say, coaches are just pushing either up or down this, let's say, stuff, and this is the stuff that I am pretty much constantly, let's say, worried. There is the saying that chess, probably it was Richard Teichmann, the author of this statement, as the first one, but I'm not sure about it. But anyway, chess is 99% of tactics. Is it true? And what does it actually mean from your perspective, being the author of the book, all of the research?
Yeah, to me, it's not true. But tactics can always lead to you losing. So there's a grain of truth to it. You need to. Any oversight can make you lose a game. So you need, like, constant diligence to at least not mess up. Now, in terms of, like, actually winning, I don't think chess is 99% tactics, especially as you get stronger. There's plenty of room for strategy as well. But there is, like, a core level of noticing your opponent's threats and putting your pieces on safe squares that, until you get to that level, it's 99% that, you know? So there's a grain of truth to it, but I don't really agree.
Can we make the point that with some kind of, let's say, progress, the stronger you are, the less focused on tactics you should be? For example, if you're a beginner, you should focus on tactics very much, because otherwise you lose every game or most of the games. But the higher you are, you do not need to be that much focused on tactics, because there are other elements that you need to address. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and another question again from our friend Rado. He's super, let's say, curious about this stuff. That's why I'm very grateful for Rado being with us as well, because this is the guy that is always asking me the questions that I said, finally, I'll find the guy who'll answer all of your questions. Ben, can you get into the interview? No problem, Thomas. And therefore, let's get into the next question by Rado. Mark Dvoretsky said that the fastest way for beginners to improve at chess is to increase physical fitness. What's your opinion on that?
Wow. So I've got a chapter on that as well. So I don't know if it's the fastest way to improve. I think it's especially important if you're playing tournament games. If you're playing long games, then physical fitness becomes extremely important. But if you're playing shorter games, then I think actual chess is probably more important. But again, chess hopefully just plays one, it just occupies sort of one corner of your life. And, all things being equal, physical fitness is pretty important. So
therefore, we need to take into consideration this element as well to become good at chess, right? At some point.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can't hurt. I mean, there's a reason that all these top guys are emphasizing fitness lately.
Okay, and another question or another topic I would like to start with and to you to address it is working on your game away from the board. How is it possible? How can you work on the game if you're away from the board? Is it possible?
Right. So that gets into the physical fitness question. So I have a question. I have a chapter about meditation and physical fitness. I have a chapter about tournament routines, like how to approach the tournament away from the game. I have a chapter about mental checklists. I have a chapter quoting Neil Bruce, a guy, popular Twitter personality who's been on the pod a few times, talking about how to develop good habits. So that whole section of the book is about things that like approaches to chess or things you can do in your life that will help your chess game, but don't on their own have anything to do with chess.
And another question from the chat, this time by our friend Becomes Resolute, is adequate sleep more important than fitness for chess performance?
It's kind of tough to, I would say in the short term, definitely. If you're playing a tournament, whether you're physically fit or whether you got enough sleep the night before, like that, the night before, it's so immediate that you can't function if you're tired. Whereas if you're out of shape, like that's something your body has become somewhat acclimated to. So over the long term, it's going to make a difference in your chess, but over the short term, not necessarily. There's a guy I've collaborated with, Dr. Benjamin Porteau, who's like, he's kind of like a performance coach for the U.S. the Great Britain's women's Olympiad team. And he's a huge advocate of sleep. I mean, he says, you have to get at least 8 hours, especially when you're engaged in competition. But it's tough because as you do play in chess tournaments, a lot of people, myself included, like I generally am a pretty good sleeper, but when I play in tournaments, it's one of the only times I have trouble sleeping because your mind is just firing all day. And then it's kind of tough to slow it down. So it's kind of a catch-22. But ideally, you're not choosing between sleep and physical fitness, but in the short term, sleep is just so important.
Yeah, I agree with this. Even if sometimes there is a little bit of phenomena that even if we sleep a little bit less than expected, at the next day when we are going to the tournament, we are that much focused that at some point we are playing a little bit better than if you've slept a little bit longer. But probably this is the effect of placebo, that we are very much focused about this lack of sleep and therefore we are just going up to the higher alertness. What about that?
Maybe, but I also think it's the kind of thing that like it works until it doesn't.
Yeah, of course. I do not mean it's the panaceum, right? But rather about some kind of, let's say, trick related to placebo effect, right?
Yeah, but if you have a long game, I just feel like sooner or later you're gonna slip up.
Yeah, and sooner or later your awareness drop and the blunder will pop up on the board, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, another topic that is very important, because back then, let's say 15 years ago, there were very popular so-called checklists. The lists that you need to put one by one in order to see if the move is good or bad and to see what you should do and so on. They were pretty popular back then. Nowadays, it's way less. And therefore, the question for you, Ben, what is a checklist and should we use it all the time during the game?
Yeah, so I think, I read about that, and I think that it can be used to address certain weaknesses or certain shortcomings you might notice in your own game. Of course, for newer level players, they're constantly taught to do what's called a blunder check, where you look at the checks, captures, and threats that your opponent can make before you make your move. So that's an example of a very sort of basic mental checklist that you can keep in mind. Of course, Grandmaster Jakob Aagaard has revolutionized chess thinking for a lot of people with this idea of asking yourself 3 questions when you're not sure what to do in a quiet position. What is my opponent's planning? What is my worst place piece? Man, I'm tired. I'm drawing a blank on the third one. This is embarrassing.
No problem.
But there's many different checklists you can use, and there's also 2 different types of checklists. So I actually quote from this great book called The Checklist Manifesto that's not about chess per se, but basically there's what's called a read-do checklist and a do-confirm checklist. And a read-do checklist is where you read it and then you do it and you go step by step. So if you're playing a practice game online, you could have checks, captures, and threats, or Aagaard's 3 questions that I just forgot, right in front of you. And when you want to like drill that thought pattern, you could physically place a check. But do confirms means it's something where you're going to have to check it later. Like I talk about how I'm not great at managing my time. And even in speed chess, I fall behind on the clock. So I might have what's called a do confirm checklist where I say, okay, every speed chess game I play, I'm never going to be more than 10 seconds behind on the clock. Now, if I'm playing like a 5-minute game, that's not something that I can check after every single move because I'm not even going to be able to play the game. But I can do a do confirm where after the game I say, okay, did I do it or did I not do it? And then you can sort of try to get a streak going. So there's a lot of ways that you can use checklists to attempt to work on your game, but a lot of it's going to be based on hopefully working with a coach, or sometimes you can use these algorithms like Lichess Insights or Aim Chess, where they'll tell you need to work on certain aspects of your game. Like maybe they'll tell you that you do poorly in the opening, so you decide you're going to take a bit more time in the opening and develop a checklist around that. So there's lots of ways you can do it, and especially with generally I'm an advocate of the fact that you can play tournament games as like a better way to improve than online games. But online games are a great way to sort of practice your mental patterns and potentially use checklists to work on certain things.
And by the way, back then with the, let's say, checklist, there was the thing that the checklists were too long. For example, the checklist, instead of consisting of 5-6 points, they consisted of 18 to 20. And
that's way too many.
And after that, you cannot, let's say, remind all of the, let's say, points from the checklist and put this every time with every move, you're and your opponent, right? Because you will be mentally, let's say, drained out, and you will be make the blunder not because of your play, but because of the overloading the system, right?
Yeah.
Okay, another question that is related to the stuff that we are...
Hold on, first of all, I have to say the third Aagaard question, because it's one of the weaknesses. It was driving me crazy.
No problem.
I remember it as weaknesses, pieces, plan. What are the weaknesses? What is my worst place piece? What is my opponent intending? All right.
Okay,
had to undo that embarrassment. Go ahead.
No problem. I will just edit this.
Thank you. It never happened.
Put it into the right place. Okay.
Yeah.
And another stuff related to the, let's say, being overloaded and playing out too much intense, many times too much intense, either training chess and some like combination of both, is the idea of the plateau, or maybe the issue of the plateau. How to recognize and how to break through the plateau.
Yeah, so this is a tough one. I'm kind of downbeat in that chapter. So basically, I say that, and I'm not the first person to say this, but plateaus are the norm. Like when you come to chess new, it's super fun, and often you can kind of have this fairly steep ascent for a while. And that's kind of one of the most fun phases of chess. And sometimes people will have more than one phase like that, but there will eventually become a point where you're really struggling to improve. And the main advice, and I do quote from like a wide variety of sources in the book, and the main advice that they give, and I even read outside of chess literature about how to sort of break through mental barriers and break through plateaus, is to change your routine and look for, things that are working once you do change your routine. But I do kind of give the somewhat of a downer advice that when you hit a plateau, if you're an adult chess player, there's no guarantee you're going to break through. So you can't design your life around the fact that you're going to be a grandmaster someday. If because there's a very good chance it's not going to happen. There just reaches a point where it just becomes difficult to improve. So you certainly want to keep trying different things, see what's working, see what's not working, can continually tweak from there. But there's no guarantee that you'll ever break through a plateau, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And what about this is the addition or extension for this question, what about the breaks? Because sometimes I just notice that the players who are intensely playing and especially intensely training for the longer period, let's say at least 3 to 5 months, they are starting to make a little bit like something like a burnout or a little bit like plateau or both. Do you think that after some kind of intense training, intense playing, the break is the key component to make all of the knowledge, all of the skills, all of the experience integrated, and then it is some like quiet down, and after that there is something like a little bit like jump or something like overcoming this plateau, at the same time stopping the opportunity to get a burnout? What do you think?
I mean,
about
there certainly have been people who've advocated for that. Like there was a guy, Philemon Thomas, who very inspiring story. He started chess as an adult and it took him 12 years, but he went from a total beginner to a USCF master as an adult. And that's what he would do. He played tournament chess a lot, but he said he would have periods of burnout. And whenever he had periods of burnout, he would take a break completely and then, get back to it a month later. I mean, something to keep in mind is rating is often what's called a lagging indicator. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't reflect your performance that day. As Tomas said, you might learn a bunch of new things, but need time to be able to put them into practice. And, it won't be fully reflected until months later. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to take a break. It just means that maybe if you did, then the results would show up later. But I don't think personally that there's like inherent value, independent value in taking a break. But if you're feeling burnout, you certainly shouldn't feel guilty about taking a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, because some players are too much intensely practice and they are just having the mental, let's say, capacity that they are overloading their system, and they are just either shy away, either they are just, let's say, do not want to blame themselves, and they are deliberately not doing the breaks. And after that, they start getting burnout. And that's why many times I tell them, even if you make a 2 weeks break, not touching chess, anything chess related. If you go fishing, if you go hiking, if you go for a walk, if you just riding, walking, anything that is not chess related, after these 2 weeks, the hunger for chess and all of the structure that is integrated with the skills that you are practice will be a way more, I would say, fresher and better solidified. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I do. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question. About podcasts is from our friend Pumpkin the Cat. Mike, do you recall any podcast interview that gave you particular insights on plateaus?
Let me think. Particular insights on plateaus. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, Philemon Thomas, I mean, he was someone who mentioned going through some really tough times. I mean, Jakob Aagaard told a story about coaching Sam Shankland. Sam Shankland, of course, had this legendary breakthrough in 2018, where he'd been stuck. I mean, this is sort of first world problems, how amazing he was at chess to begin with, but he'd been stuck between the 2600 and 2700 level for something like 6 years. And he just felt like, maybe this is my peak. Maybe this is as far as I can go. And he talked about it with Jakob, like, should I keep training or should I just focus on my chess educational material?
There is another question from our chat. The question is related to puzzles. What does it mean if you cannot get past the specific rating in puzzles? Let's say 1800, 2000, 2200, 2350. Is there something like a issue that if you cannot break specific level at puzzles, I mean exclusively at puzzles, there is something wrong with you, with your approach, with the level of difficulty? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so that gets to the sort of plateau question, and that does get to what I write about in a chapter about sort of deliberate practice and brain development and stuff like that. And again, the sad fact is you may not be at this point, but there does become a point where it becomes really hard to improve your calculation abilities, your ability to visualize. Basically, I quote this guy that I'm friendly with, cognitive scientist who's written some books, and he's a USEF master, Dr. Christopher Chabris, who talks about basically there's two different types of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. And fluid intelligence is basically your ability to solve problems quickly, do math in your head, learn languages, stuff like that. And that's where chess calculation fits in. Whereas crystallized intelligence is stuff like vocabulary, or it could even be opening knowledge. And it's fairly easy to continue to improve those things throughout your life. But in terms of just like actual processing power, then after the age of 25, it becomes increasingly difficult to improve at that. And in a chess realm, I think if you come to chess relatively new after the age of 25, you can probably still improve reasonably quickly over some time, but there will become a point where calculation becomes, you get a less improvement for more time so you can still make marginal improvements, but there will come a point where you're not going to gain hundreds of points. Say if you're 40 years old, almost no matter what you do. It's really kind of sobering. Now, there are other aspects of the game that you can try to compensate. You can say, okay, so you can approach it two ways. You can say, you can accept it and just not work on tactics, or you can say I'm going to work on other aspects that I can improve. Like I interviewed this older player, Terry Chapman, who's also featured in Matthew Sadler's book, Chess for Life. He's in his 60s, still playing, still putting up good results, but he focuses a lot more on openings. Now he's a master level player, but basically his idea is that's something where I can still get good bang for my buck. I can know the structures better than my opponents. I can continue to memorize deeper into the opening. So that's something where you're not going to be constrained, but with calculation, unfortunately, sooner or later, it's going to become really hard to improve.
I fully agree. And the question that maybe, let's say, a little bit half jokingly said, but I guess it's serious as well, so like half and half, is the question or maybe the statement with the, let's say, intention of question from our friend Become Resolute. He says, I have a family much like Ben. The hardest challenge is finding time for chess. Is there any advice Ben can provide on finding time for chess play and study?
There's not much that I can provide. I mean, it really takes sacrifice, and I'm not one to automatically say that it's necessarily worth all the time that you might have to give up. I mean, I've certainly interviewed people who wake up before their families in order to put time in, or if you still feel alert enough, like after your family goes to bed. But, time is the most irreplaceable resource in all of our lives. So I don't have any advice on how to conjure it any more than anyone else.
Maybe we need to introduce some kind of system at Lichess or at Chess.com or maybe all of the platforms that whenever you are reaching some of the specific number of wins, numbers of solved puzzle and so on, you buy some kind of additional time for your training. What about that?
Sorry, say that again.
One more time. If you get into the specific rating, either in the puzzle, in the ratings online, either you solve specific number of puzzles correctly, you can some kind of redeem the, let's say, success at the online into the real life time. For example, I solved 10 puzzles
that would
correctly.
Be amazing.
I get 2 hours in my time.
Yeah,
right?
that would be amazing.
Probably a little bit difficult, but we'll be working on that, right?
Yep.
We'll do it. And now another question from Rado. Thank you very much, Rado, for being that much active. Chess community exaggerates what is a limit to the possible chess development / achievement for most people. There was even an article that suggested 1200 is the maximum for most people. What's your opinion?
No, I think people can definitely get over 1200.
Yeah, but what would be your opinion? Let's say, what is this maximum for majority of people, right? Let's say majority. What is the, let's say, the ceiling that most people cannot break if they do not dedicate to chess? Not just playing like a hobbyist, but a little bit like the devotion or sacrifice.
I mean, I'm not sure I follow. So someone who just learns how to play but doesn't study, or
No, I mean something like if you have, let's say, 1,000 players, or maybe 1 million players, if the players are playing like a hobbyist, without a way of devotion, a lot of training, a lot of coaches and so on, what would be the maximum level that they cannot break without some kind of additional support? For example, if they're playing casually, they are not able to break, let's say, 2400, right? Because it is a professional level at this point. And what would be the level for majority of players? Not for all, but majority. What is your point?
Sorry, I just don't understand the question. Can we pass on this one?
Okay, we can pass it and let's go next one. No problem.
Okay. Thomas, unfortunately, with this stuff going on in my house, I have to go in about 5 minutes. I have to call the plumbing company about the fact we just found out we're not going to have hot water all weekend.
Do you mean we need to finish in 5 minutes?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay, therefore, let's make it quickly. Maybe I'll put that question from the list. Maybe let's make a bullet session. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Just 20 seconds for each answer will be let's making the bullet. Another one is how much online chess is different from over the board. The main points. Online,
to
over
me,
the board.
Yeah, to me, it's leaps and bounds different. You know, in the chapter about sort of trying to generate neuroplasticity, trying to assimilate new patterns, have learning experiences as an adult. I quote Dr. Andrew Huberman, you know, the Huberman Lab podcast. His episodes 6 and 7 are very interesting about how adults can sort of cultivate skills and try to continue to learn new things throughout the aging curve. And he talks about, and I've also read this in other literature, the importance of generating novel experiences. Basically, when you're a kid, you learn things kind of accidentally without any special effort. You just do things and then you're able to sort of incorporate it into your mental map and go from there. So when you're a kid, even casual games can be quite memorable for you and you can learn very valuable lessons. But as we get older, the learning experiences, it starts to become more based on sort of Darwinian ideas of sort of what's the word, like adapting to circumstances in your environment, where it needs to be something novel in order to really sort of make a mark. So I think that's part of the reason that a lot of the most accomplished adult improvers that I've interviewed play a lot of tournaments, because they're really, you know, they're investing so much money, they're traveling so far to go to these tournaments, they're spending so many hours at the board that when they grapple with these experiences, they're really able to learn from those experiences. They're really able to extract maximum lessons. Whereas when you play online, it's a little bit harder. You're in a comfortable environment. Everything looks the same. You might be playing a faster time control. So that's not to say that as an adult, it's impossible to learn through online games, but I say that you should look for ways to differentiate the games. You know, there's like the Elite Chess Leagues, the Lone Wolf and the Team League. Chess Dojo has leagues. A lot of people, when they practice online, if they're serious about improving, will set up physical chess sets so that it feels a little more tangible. There's some research that says by engaging muscle memory as you use your brain, you're more likely to remember things. So it's definitely more of an uphill climb when you're playing online, but my main advice would be try to make it feel special. Like I play Titled Tuesday on chess.com. Not everyone can play that, but if there's some special online tournament that you feel hyper focused for, that can be good as well.
Okay, very briefly, last 3 questions very quickly. What tool of improvements would you like to advise from all of this that you, let's say, said in the chapter 4?
Say that again? What
tools of improvement would you advise for the players to use that you wrote in chapter 4 of your book?
So I'm personally an advocate of meditation. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I found it to be really important for giving you the opportunity to focus longer and to sort of notice and try to eliminate negative thought patterns that you might have during the course of a game. But I mean, it's all there. Physical fitness, like making sure you get enough sleep, trying to decide if you are playing in tournaments, sort of like how seriously to take them, developing routines. I mean, there's no shortcuts. All of that stuff is definitely important, but exercise and meditation I would put at the top of the list.
Okay, and the last one, very quickly, what are the goals that you think that are realistic versus unrealistic, and how to recognize which one is which?
Well, it's going to be different for every player, but the main advice I give is try to have your goal be like one rung up on the ladder. Like if you're rated 1,000, it's okay to dream that someday you're going to become a master, but that shouldn't animate your every activity. You should be thinking about how to get to 1,200. And only when you get to 1,200, then start to think about getting to 1,400, because it's going to get harder with every step. And if you have some super long-term goal, at some point it might be discouraging if it feels very far away. So I can't give very individualized goals, except to say that the more proximate the goal, the better. They also, of course, talk about, there's this idea of SMART goals, SMART, specific, measurable, attainable. Again, I'm tired,
realistic,
so I'm going to forget. Relevant and timely.
Relevant,
I think it is. So you want to make sure that it's meeting those parameters, basically. So instead of saying like, I want to get better at chess, you might want to say, I want to be able to do the rook and king checkmate in 30 seconds or something like that. There's a lot you could work on.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you very much, Ben, for all of the stuff that you provided to us. Thank you very much for, let's say, writing this book for our community to learn from all of this stuff. And thank you very much for supporting our community for whatever you do, especially just podcasts, but at the same time, providing all of the, let's say, interesting facts, interesting newsletters, the books that you publish. And we are keeping fingers crossed that you'll be doing another stuff soon. And if you'll do it, contact Tom and we'll be doing another interview.
Will do. Always fun to chat with you. And I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. Got kind of a crisis going on in the house that I have to deal with. So
we are very grateful for that. Thank you very much for being with us and keeping fingers crossed on your success on and off the board.
Okay. Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.